there was a workshop at Mass Art taught by a woman named Lane Goldsmith, and she taught us how to make felt out of sheep fleece, layering it and then the wet process. And I loved the results. The fabric was like this amazing texture and weight, and like there was just so much possibility that I saw, but the cold wet process was just not my thing at all. And so I was home visiting my parents one weekend, and my dad said, "Oh, you could probably create the same texture, just shrink wool sweaters." And I thought, oh my goodness, like that's such a good idea. And I think it was that very day that my dad and I went trundling off to the local thrift store to just see what was out there for wool sweaters. And so we found a bunch that actually had already been felted. Like that's probably why somebody had given them away, because they shrank them and they were too small. So from that point forward, I don't think I ever made another piece of felt. Like
So we're talking 35 years ago, aren't we?
that was I think that was in 1984 or 1985. And then I just started kind of messing around with that texture and like washing and drying in the washing machine, like machine wash and dry, shrink it, wash and dry it again, shrink it more, kind of like just playing with the texture that resulted in the very easy process of just the machine wash and dry. And I started making these little guys. This is a ragamuffin. The first ragamuffin I ever made was made from handmade felt, and people really liked it. And I thought, oh, I could do like color and texture and pattern without, the handmade felt was almost like, it almost looked like rock. Like it was all kind of natural sheep colors. And my palette has always been kind of mixed pattern, brightly colored. So when I translated the ragamuffins to the sweater material, it was like it was just like a kid in a candy store. I was just so smitten by the process. And then I started selling them. There was a little craft store cooperative in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is actually the same metropolitan area as Boston. And I sold them as many as I could make for the whole time I was in college. And I also sold them in other venues. I sold them, like I'd go to music festivals and sell them, like people would sell t-shirts. I would sell ragamuffins. I was always a little shy about that kind of setting. Like it took more explaining. Like a t-shirt is a t-shirt, you get that. But like, oh, what is that? Like it would take a little bit more kind of input on my part. So I kind of thought, well, selling from a store is just much easier. So then I just focused on that, and graduated from art school without any debt, and had paid my way. And then about well, it was like the following June, I applied for a craft fair, the American Craft Council. They have wholesale shows. I think they still do. I'm not really sure. But I applied for that and I got accepted, and I went there with my ragamuffins, and I also had a few like blankets and sweaters that just really simple stuff. And I wrote a ton of business. That was in 1989. So that's kind of like when I say I founded my business in 1989, that's when I started, like, I knew how to, like, oh, I need a business structure. Oh, I probably need insurance. I'm going to know how to pay people. Like that kind of structure came into my business, but I'd already been kind of conducting business just myself for a few years at that point. And I knew that I loved it. And I love thrift store shopping. So it was kind of like, this marriage of all the things that were important and that I loved. So yeah, and then 2 years after I graduated from Mass Art, I graduated in 1988. So the following June, I did the wholesale show, and then within the next year and a half, I had 40 employees, and my business was like just like popcorn, like just grew. And there was a lot of attention, media attention. Nobody had seen anything like what I was doing. There was a little bit of like horrification. People were like, what is it made out of? Like, is it clean? Like a lot of that. And I did just compassionate education, teaching people, yes, it's clean. This is how I clean it. This is the process that I use. This is why I do this. And, it was a little exhausting initially, just to like realize that was part of my business model, was the education. I hadn't really thought that through initially.
And the
But
zero waste term didn't exist then.
no, that was new. Yeah, so I got I think it was 95. It was 1995 that I was invited to present at the Social Venture Network's annual conference, and I brought I went there with my business. They asked me to present because I had a zero waste business. That was the first time I'd heard that term coined. And I thought to myself, like, I'm not actually a zero waste business because I do throw things away. Like there's threads that come off the sewing machine and, to me, that's not zero waste. And I actually like to be pretty careful about how I use that term because I'm very literal. And most people would probably consider my business zero waste, but there's a little bit of waste. But at any rate, it put me on in a platform where I was able to share my business and my kind of set of values that enabled me to build my business with a group of people who were pretty influential. So that the social venture network members were people like Ben and Jerry, and Tom's of Maine was a toothpaste company that has been, actually Ben and Jerry's has also been bought out by a large corporation at this point. But that was the echelon of people that I was speaking to, and it was just it was really it just brought me a lot of realization that I was having an impact, and it empowered me to a level where, I was pretty shy, and going into it was really hard for me to present, and I did it, and I was like, I did that. Now I can do it again, and I can learn from that. Yeah.
So you're actually stepping up into a leadership area with your Stitcherhood group now. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah. So it was about 2 years ago that I founded a membership, and I saw that there was a need for people to have connection, and also there's a lot of people who are entrepreneurs that are using textile waste as their raw material. And there's a lot of naysayers that are like, oh, you're never going to make money at that, or what are you thinking? Or just self-doubt, really. So I founded Stitcherhood to kind of answer that, and to bring people together who shared knowledge of their own journeys, and that with a real passion around impacting our textile waste crisis. And also to enable people who might never have thought of it as a business to reconsider, and to have the opportunity to think of their hobby as an opportunity to create a more commercial entity. For me, that's really important, because I feel like if we can create businesses that are successful with textile waste as raw material, then we are able to exponentially impact that textile waste crisis by needing more of the waste, right? And then impacting more customers who buy those products to see that was made out of, oh look, there's a ribbing from the bottom of the sweater, and they suddenly, like, a light bulb goes on, and they realize that there's this whole world of opportunity for them to choose differently with their purchasing, right? And then the Stitcherhood members have each other to commiserate, sounds negative, but just to commune with, right? And to understand, like, when you're costing a product that's used material made, it's not the same as costing a product that's made out of fabric you buy by the yard. Replicating the product, there's a lot of intricacies that are different about running a business when you're using recycled material. And so we really focus on that, right? We focus on helping people to build truly sustainable, meaning well-paid textile waste businesses, and I love it. And I like to pivot. I get tired of doing the same thing. 22 years I ran a production company, and I loved it, and I loved lots of aspects of it. But I was really ready for a change when I pivoted into writing my book in 2009, and then again now when I'm running the Stitcherhood as a membership.
And it actually evolved out of the pandemic and a project that you were doing then. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the Stitcherhood came about because, having coined this term, the zero waste, right? So I was like, oh, I have waste. What am I going to do with it? I know. I'll rope everybody else into using it. So every year or two, I would run what I called a scrap box challenge. And you could sign up to participate, and, I would send you a box of scrap, and the kind of assignment was to create something. Could be art, could be anything. Could just create something out of this box of scrap from my studio. And it was kind of a competition. We'd have voting, and somebody won, and it was just this fun kind of completely community-based making process that it actually happened. The last one I did was right before the pandemic hit. So we sent out there were 60 people participating. We only had 60 boxes, which to me was just like a lot of boxes, but over 200 people applied. We chose 60 people at random, and then those people got their box. The box arrived right as the same like time that my kids were like told at school, there's a pandemic, you can't come to school for 2 weeks. And the following it was like a 5-month period of time where we Zoomed every week, and people would make, have questions or be, show like, look what I made, or what would you do with this, or how do you think this works? And so there was this kind of community connection during a time where we were all really anxious and like, what is happening? Like, what is a pandemic, right? Like we just were learning, and we had this sort of, we couldn't commune in person. We couldn't go anywhere. Like we were all very isolated, but to have this connection really made it possible to travel into this unknown, kind of like with your home team and people together, right? So then after it was apparent that there was like a real need for that sense of community to continue, and that's kind of how Stitcherhood came about. And during that time, I did a lot of like research and learning, like how can I nurture myself and these women, they were all women, through this weird time. And, I learned things like using the right side of your brain has been scientifically proven to actually like diminish stress and anxiety and build confidence and self-worth. And I thought, well, what could be better? Like that's what stress and anxiety was like so high. Like we were all just like, what is going to happen next? We were washing our groceries. Like we just didn't want to touch any, like it was just, there was so much of it. So, I started learning about that. And then I started thinking, well, not only are we using the right side of our brains, we're making something from literally a box of trash, right? And then on top of that, we're nurturing the environment because that trash isn't going to the landfill. And on top of that, we have all these connections of friendships developing, right? So there was like this kind of circle of, an infinity of wins that just kept feeding upon each other and rippling out to these 60 people's lives and families and communities. And it was a really moving and meaningful experience for everybody. And then that, became Stitcherhood. It became our Stitch Along projects that we do that are community based. That we make blankets together. Everybody makes a little square. So there's a lot of value. Value is not the word I'm looking for. There's a lot of it's so important. Like that is so important. And I feel like there's not as many places in our culture today to find that level of connection with your like-minded people or family members, whoever, people in general. It's sort of been removed a little bit, I think, by our culture.
So making for well-being is definitely a thing.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, it's like it's really interesting. Somewhere I will try to find it. I have a box of cards that people sent to me unsolicited. People from the Stitch Alongs, people from that first the last Scrapbox project I did. This changed my life. You have no idea how much this meant to me. I will never lose track of so-and-so. We became friends in your thing. Like, I mean, I kept them because they're like so like heartfelt and like, I know that what I do is cool. I know that people enjoy it, but like just to read that I saved somebody's life because I gave them a box of scrap. Like, let me save your life. Come over here. I'll send you a box of scrap. Like, it's not hard, right? Like, it's so easy to provide. Well, it's not just the box of scrap. It's like the care. I think there's something about the care. There's something about that. Well, it's relationships, I think. We talked a little bit about that. Like, there's such value and human connection, right? Like, and we're all sort of separated as we live today. And that human connection is very special and very, I think it's something that maybe science hasn't yet proved, that it serves us in a way that maybe isn't really documented at this point. Like, we have to have that to be happy people, right? So yeah, that's.
And how does it relate to what we wear? Like some of these things are hands off, removed from our bodies, you
Yeah.
know, but what about the clothing aspect and,
Oh, I
you know,
think that's
getting
so,
engaged there?
so it's so pertinent, right? Like, we can buy dresses for, $12 from Shein, and we have no connection. It's like the kids in the city who think carrots come out of a plastic bag. Like, nope, they come out of the earth, right? Like, if you think about who made your clothes, then or if you know who made your clothes, or if you made your clothes, right? There's like increasing levels of nurturing and well, it's about confidence. It's about self-esteem. It's about self-worth. It's like all the things that were kind of absconded from our well-being, our way that we are, our ability to buy that fast fashion dress, stole that from us, right? So now we have to kind of like eke it back out, right? And it's ours, right? That's ours. So when you make your clothes, or when you support a maker of clothing, you're increasing the well-being of the human race, the humans in general. It's not you and me. It's like you and me and every other person. There's a connection between what you choose to support and how that ripples, and it ripples for a very long time, right? Like, there's just goes on and on and on. Like, there's never, it's almost like it never stops, right? Like it, and it's, I don't like to be negative, but the ripples also ripple from the negative side. Like, if you support the people who are exploiting low wage earners, then they can exploit more low wage earners. So it's a special place that we hold, where we have a power to vote with our purchase, right? Like, we can say, no, I don't want to support that. I'm going to support making my own, or supporting someone who's got integrity, who's doing really beautiful work with materials that are already here, that kind of feeds us all, right? Like, we all need to be fed. So yeah. This is the first sweater I ever made. And it was before I knew that I was going to sell sweaters. So this is from, I don't know, maybe 1991 or something like that. And I used to smoke cigarettes, and I would smoke outside. So I made this sweater. It was my smoking sweater, so I could sit outside and be warm and have my cigarettes. And then I, like, this sweater, this is like two sleeves of the same sweater. And these were polka dots that were on the original sweater. And I just thought that was cool. And then I put this was like, holes. So, visible mending, before that was a word.
So this is 35 years old.
Yeah, I would think, 32, something like that. Maybe 35. And then, this is a sweater that, someone sent me to have. That this was like a production sweater. It's a little wrinkly, but this was when I had my production company with home sewers. So this was made by one of my sewers at home, and they would take home, bags of sweaters that were like from the thrift store, and then they would bring back sewn sweaters. So they made all the color choices. There would be like a color palette. This was called Brights. And so like all the bright sweaters were in a giant box, and they would dig through and take the ones they liked. And they had, they had to have different tones. They couldn't use like all the blues together. They knew like what the kind of guidelines were. And then this sweater is a more recent, but still probably a few years old style. This was the hoodie, pocket hoodie. This is a cashmere sweater. And this was my son's sweater, actually, and there's a bunch of visible mending. He was kind of a wild dresser, but also like the mending I put on here was pretty, you couldn't really see it from across. Like, there's one. So it was kind of like visible, but not so visible, not like screaming at you kind of mending. And yeah, just super like cozy. I'm all about like comfort and function, and then handmadeness and reuse. So that was in this style, the hoodie style, I made, I don't know how many hundreds of these, and people, unisex. They're easy fit because they're kind of oversized. And we did I don't think we even sized those. I think there was just like, yeah, there was just a one size for the hoodie pullovers. So those are kind of like the historical pieces that I have. Yeah, so this rug is made out of wool sweaters and pieces of socks. I'm just putting this is actually gonna be the warp, and I normally load the other way first, but the loops I started with were too long to fit the other way. So I'll just load this up, then I'll take these off. Or actually, maybe what I'll do is just turn the loom, because I like to weave from the bottom up. It's just easier. And these are just tubes that are actually, this had been a sock, so probably a toe and a cuff that way. And I just loop them together and make them the size to fit. You know, with a kind of even tension. You know, you don't want anything to be super tight, because then it makes it really hard to get it off the loom later. But there's kind of a sort of happy place where that it's tight enough but not too tight. And once I get this all loaded, then I know that I have the right number, and then I also know that they'll fit there, and I'll make shorter ones for the other direction. Just about to, well, this is there's a couple things I love about this process. You can play with color, which is really fun for me. I love putting like little bright bits in, and then it's quick. I'm sort of like one of those people who's like super inspired by pretty instant gratification, and you know, you can make a rug in no matter a couple, you know, I can do them really quick, but even if you're new to it, you can make the rug in a couple hours. So, and you can, you can use super like polyester stuff you wouldn't necessarily want next to your skin or to wear. You can use for this process.
And it's all knit.
Yeah, it's all stretchy. Yep, it's easier to work with stretchy material, and you know, now with you know, the advent of spandex, you can really use jeans or whatever, any kind of stretchy material. Of course, denim, you know, the wovens will kind of ravel a little bit, but it's the structure of the rug kind of holds the raveling to a minimum. And then once they're complete, you can really, they're really durable. You can throw them in the washing machine. They do take a little while to dry, and the dryer, you don't want to spend too much, you don't want to put them in the dryer. They just take a long time in there, and it's not really efficient fuel wise, but you know, I just dry them out on top, like lay them on a flat surface and turn them every day till they're dry. So yeah, look, those colors come along nice.
So how do you actually finish off the rug, Crispina, at the end?
So when you weave it all the way up, and then what I do, I go back and I kind of make sure that the loops here are even, you know, and then I start at the top, and you feed one loop through the next. It's like finger crochet, and then when you get to the corner, you just keep going. I usually start here, go down, across, back up, and then the weight of the rug is hanging on the loom rather than on your arms, and then the top would be my last edge to finish, and that's done. You pull that last loop through. Sometimes I'll cut that last loop and tie a knot, and then I usually stitch through it because that'll hold it. With the rugs, because they're such a large scale weave structure, that if any part of it comes out, it comes apart quickly, right? So you just have to make sure that it's really securely made, and then it'll last for years. I have actually the very first rug I ever made. I'll show it to you. It's in the other room, and it was made in 1990, so it's very old. I've washed it. I've used it in many different settings and in my booth at shows, and it's just you know, it's a little faded. It's bright red, so or it was bright red at one point, but that's really the only kind of wear in it. So really useful. And there's no chemicals. There's no, you know, a lot of carpeting has all kinds of weird like chemical treatment and fire retardant and synthetic fibers, and these rugs can have synthetic fibers in them if you choose that for your material, but you know, there's no off-gassing involved. it's the felted texture of the sweaters that it makes this either easy or hard. And people always ask me, how do you do that? You just have to make them felted enough so they don't stretch too much.